This research was conducted all across the coastal plains in Rocky Mount, Lewiston, and then down in the Blacklands at Plymouth. So what our ag engineers did was take these aerial images and correlated this to a map of plants, and this way they could create an algorithm where they map a reference plant, and then they could count or measure the distance to adjacent plants within that row all the way through to the end of the plot. So we're measuring the entire area versus just a sample area and the accurate measurement of those size and frequency of skips in all of these different treatments. So set that aside. We wanted to use this as a training exercise. So what I want you to do here is just take a minute and see if you can guess the percent of the planted area occupied by 3-foot skips or greater. Now just focus at the bottom of the picture that you see here up to the green line, just that area and just those middle 2 rows. That's the only area you need to evaluate. So keep in mind, just for example, if you have 10 feet of row and there are 5 continuous feet of skipped area, then the percent of planted area occupied by 3-foot skips or greater would be 50%. So you only want to focus on skips that are 3 foot or greater, okay? In that same scenario, if you have 10 feet of row and there's only 2 feet of skipped area in that 10 feet of row, then you would completely ignore that because that's less than 3 feet. So that would be 0. So you only want to make sure you're counting or considering 3-foot skips or greater. So take a minute and see if you can guesstimate what the percent of the planted area is occupied by 3-foot skips or greater. All right, so about 20 of our local cotton experts participated in this exercise in the field, and they estimated the percent of planted area occupied by 3-foot skips or greater to be anywhere from 60 to 95%, so fairly wide range that you see there. And the average across all of those experts was 78%. So the actual measured area was 89%. So you can see there's some variance there from actual manual measurements versus visual estimations, even amongst our experts that you can see. All right, another scenario. See if you can take a minute in this plot, guess the percent of the planted area occupied by 3-foot skips or greater. Now again, ignore any skips that are less than 3 feet in size. Only consider those that are 3 foot or greater. So our experts in this scenario, we see a little bit wider range here. They guessed anywhere from 30 to 80% occupied by 3-foot skips or more, with an average of 59%. The actual measurements here were 71% occupied by 3-foot skips or more. So a little more deviation between visual estimations and manual measurements. All right, so completely change your mindset here. Ignore the 3-foot skips. We want you here to guesstimate the percent stand, okay? Keep in mind this was planted at 43,500 seed per acre. That's 3 seed per foot on 36-inch rows. And the reason we're asking you this is we get these questions all the time. What percent stand can we live with? So I want to just take a second and see if you can guess what the percent stand is, keeping in mind that this was planted at 3 seed per foot on 36-inch rows. All right, so this plot looks pretty good. All right, our experts estimated this plot or these 2 rows to be anywhere from 70 to a 95% stand. with an average across all those sampled to be 85%. The actual stand here is a 50% stand. All right, the reason we wanted to show you this is it's a little bit misleading. All right, so this was that 50-50 mixture that we applied, and we essentially killed every other plant with herbicides. Those were conventional seed. All right, so the plants that are survived, as you can see in this photo, are fairly equidistantly spaced. And especially for early planted cotton, keep in mind that cotton can compensate for small skips, especially. And, you know, if they're equidistantly spaced, that's not necessarily a big deal. So we, you know, when we get that question on what percent stand can we live with, we really need to reframe that and focus on the size and frequency of skips and go back to focusing on 3-foot skips or greater, not necessarily a percent stand. All right, so just some yield results from last year, and I don't want to pretend that this was the case for all trials and all locations, but this is just one example from the early planted trials from 2019. All right, so we really didn't see a major yield loss until we got down to 25% stand. But our replanted treatment, now keep in mind, this is early planted cotton, planted end of April, early May, with our replant treatment on May 25th. And that's in most situations, that has an equal chance of performing as well as early May planted cotton. It's not always the case, depending on rainfall and other factors. But just based on average heat unit accumulation, this should be the case. So you can see acceptable yields with the replant treatment there on May 25th compared to early May planted cotton, especially our 175% stand. Well, we did lose yield at a 25% stand, which we'll talk a little bit about that later. That's the one that had the most 3-foot skips or greater. That's the point where we noticed most of those skips occurring. Now, in a late planted scenario, we started seeing a little different behavior where even the 50, sometimes the 75% stand yield a little bit less than the 100% stand. So we're starting to see a little bit of effect on yield when we get to some of these treatments without a major stand loss. So it's not always the case. It depending on the environment, but we do see this trend where especially the 50% treatment is a little more commonly associated with a yield reduction. And we also noted that the replanted treatment, now keep in mind that the replant treatment was on June the 5th compared to these other treatments which were planted on May 25th, which is our last insurance cutoff, or our first insurance cutoff rather. So, you know, this is the $1,000,000 question. This is always going to be the wild card in 2 different ways. One, will your replanted cotton achieve a good stand or an acceptable stand? All right, and we rarely know that because you don't know if you're going to get a packing rain. Now, we can usually answer the question if it's related to temperatures. So if warmer temperatures are in the forecast this time, then yes, we're more likely to get a better stand. But if you get a heavy packing rain, especially if you have soils that tend to crust, you know, you may not get a good stand with the second go round. And secondly, is will the year reward late planted cotton or replanted cotton? And we don't know that either. So we're always in that dilemma with early or late planted cotton, which will the year reward? And that becomes more important when we get into late May or even June, which is the scenario in this case. How well will it do? And a lot of times it comes down to if we have a tropical storm or hurricane that negatively influences earlier planted cotton, whereas late planted cotton may be protected. So last year, for example, our later planted treatments did not perform as well, even compared to our treatments that had significant stand loss. But in a hurricane year, that may be quite different. So we don't quite yet want to redraft our recommendations. Last year was a very unique year. We kind of want to look at this in several more environments, but this is a scenario here where on your y-axis you can see the percent of replanted yield. So 1 being equal to 100% of replanted yield. Anything less than that was lower yielding, and anything greater than that is higher yielding. And we have a regression line here correlated to percent of planted area, in this case, occupied with skips greater than 3.5 feet. And so we're correlating those two, and we're drawing our regression line here to where it matches the point or meets the point where the cost of replanting is equal to that yield. So if you take $35 an acre as your replanting cost, and that was based on a survey of several growers, and you assume cotton prices of 70 cents, so we're lower than that currently. So if you do the math on that, it would take a yield loss of 50 pounds per acre to be a threshold at which the yield loss exceeds the cost of replanting. So anything greater than a 50-pound loss would exceed the cost of replanting. So if that's the case, and it's like that way every year in every scenario, if you draw this little line down to your x-axis, that would say that 7% of your area, planted area occupied by, in this case, 3.5-foot skips, that would be the point in which you need to replant. So that's quite a bit different than our current recommendations. But again, this is one scenario done in 1 year. We're looking at several different environments in several different years before we redraft our recommendations. So we don't want to change any of that yet, or any of our practices just yet. But we found this to be fairly interesting. We do want to remind everybody about our planting conditions calculator. I'll show you how to find that in just a second. But it's very easy to use. You just pull up this map of North Carolina. You can actually zoom in to a particular farm or field if you want to. Click on a place on that map and click on Submit. That's all you have to do. We have a lot more growers using it now, especially this year that we had challenging planting conditions throughout most of our planting window. And at any given time, it's going to give you a 2 to 3 day forecast. And keep in mind, for each of those days that it lists, there's actually a 5-day DD60 predicted forecast for each of those days. And it's going to rate that 5-day forecast from very good down to very poor. So in certain scenarios, it's going to trigger a warning. That, for example, if you have a nighttime that's going to drop below 50 degrees within those first 2 nights of planting, it's going to trigger a warning there telling you to be careful. Anytime it's rated as adequate or marginal, it's going to tell you to consider waiting on better conditions or switch to larger seeded varieties with a higher cool germ. That's where it pays to look in the NCDA database, plant a little bit shallower or hill drop, so on and so forth. It even has a rainfall warning. If there's a 30% chance of getting an inch of rain or more, it's going to trigger a warning. So you can hopefully avoid packing rains, although they're difficult to forecast at times. So a lot of this you can find on our Cotton Portal website. All of us on the Extension Cotton team post things on this website. There's a lot of good resources on that website. You can find it right there at the top. That's cotton.ces.ncsu.edu. You can email me. That's my email address there at the top if you want to be added to our newsletter list. We post a lot of newsletters in any given year. And then below that are links that you can find on the Cotton Portal website. But we have one there for the variety calculator, planting conditions calculator, the new NCDA seed quality database that we really are encouraging everybody to use. Our entomologists have the thrips infestation predictor. The economists have our crop comparison tool, and our weed scientists have developed a spray conditions tool, especially for those auxin herbicides. There's our Facebook page and all of our Twitter handles for all of us on the cotton team. So we encourage you to follow us and reach out to us and your county agents anytime that we can help you. So thank you. Hopefully we'll see you in person very soon.